everyone, my name is Izzy Swan and this is Think Woodworks, and today begins the 10-day woodworking marathon. My family's all on vacation. I've been left here to mess around in the shop and do whatever I want. So for the next 10 days I'm going to post as many videos as I possibly can and show you guys lots of fun and cool stuff. You know, here at Think Woodworks we take woodworking very seriously. To get started, today I'm going to show you how you can just a couple dollars in hardware and a router, you can make your own balls.
George, did he just say balls?
Over the next week, I'm going to show
Yep, Fred, he just said balls.
Alright, to get started on today's build, you're going to need a 4.5 inch 3/8 bolt. It's a smooth shank just threaded on the end, 5 3/8 washers, the small ones, 2 3/8 bolt, a 3/8 T-nut, one of these crazy looking fellas, handful of 1.5 inch screws, handful of 3/4 inch screws, a router, and a scrap piece of plywood or MDF. Okay, to get started with the build, I'm going to take my piece of MDF, which is roughly 26 inches long, and I'm going to rip down 2 sections that are 5.5 inches wide. Off of one piece of MDF, I'm going to cut 2 pieces that are 9 inches long. Off the other piece of MDF, I've cut one piece that's 10 3/4 inches long, and I'm cutting the other one to 14 inches. Alright, that last little piece of scrap I had left is just over 3 inches wide, and that's enough. I'm going to cut 2 pieces out of this that are just shy of 5 inches. I'm going to use these as braces. Next, I put a piece of double-sided stick tape on one of my 9-inch pieces, and I'm going to attach the other one to it to drill some holes. This way the holes line up exactly. Alright, on my 10 3/4 inch piece, I've drawn a center line all the way down the center of this, and on my 9-inch piece I want to measure in 1.25 inches and draw a line on that as well. This is my center line, and from those 2 marks I'm going to measure up 8 inches. Right after I got my marks, I'm going to go ahead and center punch these because I want these to stay very accurate when I drill them out. On my 9-inch piece I need to drill a 3/8 hole that's going to accept that bolt. Now I went through and tested a few of my 3/8 drill bits and found the one that's got the snuggest fit. We want this right here to be a really nice fit, so there's not any play in the bolt when you stick it through that hole. Okay, now with my holes drilled, I've taken my 2 9-inch pieces and pulled them apart. And I'm just going to take this one. I want that 1-inch piece there, measurement, or 1.25 inch measurement facing me and on my left side. If I want to, I'm going to think about this as a lathe. This will be the headstock, and this will be where my mounting plate goes. And then after I have that glued and screwed, I'm going to take my other piece and put it right on the front. And I want it thick like that when I run my bolt through here. I want like 1.5 inches so it offers us some stability to that piece that's out here turning. Okay, now with the structure all glued and screwed together, I'm going to put this plate on, and to make sure it lines up right, before I glue it and fasten it to it, I'm going to run my bolt through to make sure everything's right. Okay, next I need to work on the router carriage. What I'm going to do, this is going to be the front side, is I'm going to measure from the front side back 5 inches, and I'm going to put a line across that, and that is where our vertical member is going to go. Now, the really important part of this build is that the center of that router bit matches up with the center of this bolt. This is all about staying on center. But what I didn't do when I cut this originally was take into account the thickness of the plate that this is going to ride on. So I'm going to just mark that off with a pencil, take it over to my crosscut sled and chop it off. Okay, now that I fixed that little mistake, I've installed a 1/2 inch straight bit in my router, or dado bit, and that's going to correspond with the 1/2 inch hole I drilled in the 10 3/4 inch piece earlier. Now I'm just going to slide that in there, and that's going to center that router bit out. It's going to keep it right at the height I want it, and that's going to keep it right down the center where I want it. I'm just going to go ahead and put a couple screws in here to hold this thing in place. And then I'm going to take my router out of the base, and I'm going to mark out the inside of it, and then I'm going to cut that inside out on the. I'm going to cut the inside out on the scroll saw, and then I'm just going to mark where that router was. I'll just put a little arrow right here that indicates where the base is on that center line, so when I install it back in there, it goes right back in the same position. Alright, so I've marked that center line on my long piece here, and I've marked back again 5 inches. Now what I want to do is just kind of take a little bit of this edge off. So I'm going to go about, a 1/2 inch on either side. This will be a little more than that. And then I'm just going to come back to my line here, just shy of my line. Then I'm just going to take this over to the bandsaw and chop this off. And this is going to be the nose, and I just want to take this off so this doesn't interfere with anything. Okay, so next I've drilled out a line on our center point here at 3.5 and then one at 4.5 inches. And I'm going to take my little set tool, and I'm going to drill a hole there and a hole there at 5/16 of an inch. So with my 2 holes drilled, now I can assemble this thing, and I'm just going to do that with some glue, and then I'll use my brad nailer to nail it in place while I screw it. Alright, so with my headstock made and my router carriage made, I'm just going to go ahead and clean these up a bit while they're drying with some 100 grit sandpaper and my orbital sander, and then I'll move on to making the mounting plate that goes in the headstock here. Alright, now with my mounting plate made, I'm just going to put some Johnson's or Minwax paste finishing wax in here. And that's just going to act like a lubricant between the bolt and the MDF. I put 2 washers on the back of here already. Install another washer, and then I have a 1/2 inch piece of plywood that I made as a spacer with a 1/2 inch hole in it. And then my other 2 washers. And then I'm going to put the bolts on. I've got a tall bolt and a short bolt. This bolt's a standard bolt, and this one's a jam bolt. So get those on here and tighten those down. When I tighten them down, I want to make sure that there's no back and forth play, but not so tight that I can't turn this. Okay, so I put the big bolt on first and the small bolt on second, and then just twisted them together so they locked in place. That's called jam nutting, or jam nuts. Now once that's done, I made this handle. This handle is just a little scrap piece of plywood that's a little over 3 inches long. I drilled a 1/2 inch hole, and I put the 3/8 T-nut in there, and then some small screws to hold it in place. And on the other side, I just took a bit of scrap wood, drilled a hole through it, and then put a screw through there, making sure that that screw was mostly a smooth shaft. And then that's just going to go on here on the back side. Now it's a little close to this. I might cut some more of that out, or I might leave it, I don't know. Yeah, I'll probably end up cutting some of this out. I should have thought about that ahead of time. So I was having that problem with this handle hitting that, so I went over to my bandsaw and I just cut both of them out. If you don't have a bandsaw when you build yours, just make this one about 2 inches tall instead of 3 inches tall, and that'll be good. And so that's it. That's my headstock mounting plate and handle in place. Now all I have to do is mount the router and set up for the base. Okay, now that I've got everything pretty much ready to go with the exception of my router, I've marked it right here. That's going to be my center line, so I'm going to put that right back in place where it was, and those 2 screw holes before are going to help me line this up. Now if you're using MDF, you want to use as long a screw as possible. So in this case I'm using 3/4 inch screws. They won't go all the way through, but they're going to get in there enough to really hold this thing in place. MDF is not as strong as plywood, so the longer the screw, the better. Okay, a thing I failed to mention before is you want to, wherever your closer is or your clasp, you want to make sure that's in a convenient location. You want to be able to access that without too much hassle, so you wouldn't want it up underneath here. In my last video where I actually turned a wooden ball with this setup, I had a setup similar to this. I had a base that I made. The base is 22 by 22, and then I've just driven a bolt in the center and whacked the top of it off, and then my router would just pivot on that central point there. I'm going to do a little something different here today because I have a trick up my sleeve. I'm going to put my base on this big piece of chipboard here because I'm going to show you guys some cool stuff in another video, and I need a bigger base. So I'm just going to draw a straight line down the center, and then I want to be able to move my base back and forth about 8 inches, so I'm just going to start it there, which means I'm going to put my center mark here, and then I'm going to drill a 5/16 hole straight up and down at this center mark, and that's going to be my central pivot point at which my router pivots on. I'm just going to go ahead and center punch it, and then I need this to be pretty straight up and down. So what I've done is I've taken this piece of 1.5 by 1.5 scrap stock and I've bandsawed out a little notch, and that gives me a nice 90-degree saddle that I can center this on and then lay my bit up against, and that'll give me that 90-degree hole I need, you know, since I can't really reach it with drill press or anything. Alright, with that done, I need to make sure that this headstock and mounting plate will always be parallel or straight with this line. It always needs to move on center. We've got to keep everything on center. Now I know that my center line here is 1.25 inches from the side, so what I'm going to do is just go ahead and place that in its position, mark it here, and mark it here, and that's going to give me where I need to position this to be right on the center line there, both from the sides here. And then to keep it riding there, what I'll do is I'll just install this little guide block, and then I know this will always ride back and forth. And now to fasten this thing in position, I'm just going to run a couple of screws in the back, and that'll hold this thing down, and then I can pull the screws out and move it forward or backwards after I have my block in place. Alright, so now all I have to do is take my 5/16 bolt or pin, drop it in place and put it in that center, and then that creates the circumference that we need to create the wooden ball. You know, now everything that we do from this point on will be measured off the center of this pivot point right here, and at an 8-inch height. So it's pretty basic, not a real fancy jig. If you haven't seen my other video where I turn out this wooden ball, you should check it out. I'll put a link in the description below, and you want to tune back in because I'm going to show you how to cut some really decorative finials with this real simple setup. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. This is the first time I've done a step-by-step like this. You know, let me know what you think. If you'd like to see more of it, if you don't want to see any more of it, give me some feedback. I would certainly appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Share it with your friends. And if you haven't checked out my Facebook page or my website, I'll put links in the description box below. We got a little fun stuff going on those things. So, we'll talk to you soon. Lots more fun, crazy videos coming up. Wait till you see what else I can do with this. It's going to be fun.